Welcome to the 13th hour, the time when shadows grow long, the veil grows thin, and reality begins to bend. This is where we explore all things paranormal. It's a journey that's part mystery, part entertaining, and always unsettling. So if you're ready, then step beyond the clock face, because the 13th hour starts now.
The Johnson Encounter, Shasta Trinity National Forest, 1989. In September of 1989, the Johnson family set out on a horseback trip deep into Northern California's Shasta Trinity National Forest. This vast wilderness covers more than 2 million acres, jagged peaks, rushing rivers, and towering old-growth pines. It is an ancient land of beauty, but also a land with a reputation. For decades, the Shasta region has been steeped in stories of the unexplained, like UFO sightings, vanished hikers, underground civilizations, and strange creatures. For Donald and Carol Johnson, along with their children, 16-year-old Lucas and 10-year-old June, this was supposed to be nothing more than a late summer family adventure. They hired a seasoned local guide named Hank, a woodsman known for reading the land better than most. The day was perfect. The sun was hot on their shoulders, and the pines swayed above, scattering pine needles along the dirt path. From the tall ponderosa trunks came something unexpected. When the bark warmed in the heat, it released a fragrance like vanilla. Sweet and warm, mixing with the damp ferns and fallen leaves. It felt timeless, almost enchanted, safe. But everything changed around the next bend. 2 forest rangers stood blocking the trail, stretching bright orange safety fencing across the path. Both wore broad campaign hats, their faces shadowed and grim. "What's this?" Hank muttered. The Johnsons stiffened. One of the rangers was Joe, an old friend of Hank's. Hank nudged his horse forward. "Hi, Joe. What's going on here? Why are you blocking the trail?" Joe hesitated, his jaw tight. The other ranger never looked up. Finally, Joe said quietly, "The trail past the lake's open." Hank frowned. "That's a long detour. What's wrong out there?" But Joe gave no answer, only a forced smile and a warning. "Just take the lake route. And Hank, be careful." That guarded look on Joe's face stayed with Hank as he led the Johnsons toward the lake. The trail dipped into heavy shade. Shafts of gold glittered across the water. June gasped when a doe and her fawn stepped into the clearing. But suddenly, the forest exploded. The doe and fawn bolted. A herd followed, bounding through the brush. 2 massive bucks leapt past, antlers flashing. Overhead, birds shrieked and took flight in a frenzy. "What the hell was that?" Lucas shouted. "Watch your mouth," Carol begged nervously. And then, silence. No birds, no frogs, no movement from a forest teeming with life. "That's strange," Carol whispered. "Where did the animals go?" June asked. Hank forced calm into his voice. Sometimes the woods just go quiet. But his gut told him different. He knew something big had scared those animals. "Maybe it was a mountain lion," Lucas exclaimed. June's face turned white. "Now don't you guys worry about anything. Old Hank will keep you safe." Hank pushed aside his flannel shirt and patted his gun holster. "That's what I've got this for." "Cool," Lucas shouted. "Can I shoot it?" Hank raised his eyebrows, considering the possibility. Carol cut in. "Absolutely not." Hank's mouth bent with amusement, and with that, the mood lightened. They reached a meadow where Hank suggested they camped later than he wanted, as twilight was already pressing against the treetops and a chill creeping into the air. "Let's set up quick," Hank urged. The Johnsons worked fast, pitching tents while Hank coaxed a fire to life. Supper was simple but warm. Wood smoke curled into the evening sky as June ate her first campfire s'more. Marshmallow and chocolate smeared across her chin. She giggled, "This is the best thing I've ever eaten!" For a moment, laughter filled the meadow, until the forest cracked wide open. A deafening snap echoed like a gunshot. June grabbed Hank's arm. "What was that?" "Could be a bear," Hank said, though his voice was tight. He banged pots together, the clanging sharp against the night. Then the rocks came. The first stone flew from the dark and struck Hank in the head. Blood streaked down his face before he even realized he'd been hit. "Dad!" Lucas shouted, holding up the bloodied rock. Another stone crashed into Carol's chest. She gasped and fell back, clutching her ribs. As Donald caught her, she cringed in pain. And then came the scream. It ripped through the forest, raw, horrifying. It sounded like a woman being murdered, shrill and saturated with terror. The sound reverberated through the trunks, bouncing back and forth until it felt like the forest itself was screaming. Hank turned to Donald, his face pale in the lantern glow. "Have you ever heard a person scream like that, or growl like that? Whatever's throwing those rocks is at least 10 yards back in the trees. That would take one hell of a strong man to hurl a rock that far." The family huddled together as stones rained around them. Sparks burst as one smashed into the fire pit. And then, silence. Carol's voice broke. "Where's June?" Flashlights cut across the dark. June was gone. Beyond the firelight, the woods loomed endless and black. Donald told his son, "Stay with your mom. Don't leave her side." Lucas nodded, trembling, kneeling by Carol as she clutched her ribs. Hank and Donald pushed into the trees. "Over here," Hank said suddenly. In the dirt, a massive print. Human-like, at least 20 inches long. A deep growl rumbled from ahead. The ground seemed to hum with it, the vibration rising up through their feet, into their bones, settling heavy in their chests. Each growl louder and more terrifying than the next. Wood cracked on the right. Trees shuddered violently, bark splitting. Every hair on Donald's body stood straight up. "No human could do that," Donald whispered. "Looks like there's more than one, too," Hank said anxiously. "There's different size prints, big ones and smaller." They heard another scream. They could tell this one came from June. It sounded far off, but how could that be? She was just at the campfire only minutes ago. The two men pushed deeper into the blackness of the forest. Then it hit them. A thick, suffocating stench. It smelled like wet dog and skunk that had rolled around in rotting animals. The foulness clung to the air, burning their eyes and choking their throats. Donald gagged into his sleeve. "God, do you smell that? Whatever it is, it's close." The forest seemed alive, circling them. More prints appeared in the mud. Shadows flickered between the trees, gone before the beams could catch them. Then Hank's light caught something pale in the dirt. A teddy bear, streaked with mud. Donald snatched it up with shaking hands. She was here! A faint cry carried through the dark. Both beams swung toward it, and there she was, June, clinging to a tree trunk at least 20 feet off the ground. Her face was streaked with tears, her small legs trembling as though she might fall at any minute. Another whimper slipped free. "June!" Donald cried. "Hang on, baby! We're here!" But movement stirred below her. A massive shape stepped from the shadows. Its hands closed around the trunk, shaking it violently. June shrieked, clinging desperately. "Leave her alone!" Donald roared. The creature hurled a branch. It smashed directly into Donald, knocking him off his feet and sending him sprawling to the ground with a grunt of pain. He rolled, dazed, clutching his side, but forced himself back up. Another stone followed, whistling past Hank, splintering a tree. Hank fired his gun twice. The beast staggered, clutching its chest. Its eyes glowed with rage, teeth bared, gnashing together in fury. And then it began to advance. It was slow and predatory, but deliberate. Hank raised his gun again, and the creature stopped. Its gaze fixed on the weapon, not confused, but knowing.
as if it understood what would happen next if it proceeded. With a roar, it turned and bounded into the dark, vanishing into the trees with unnatural speed. June was halfway down the tree by the time the men could get to her. Donald pulled June into his arms as she slid from the tree, sobbing, clutching her teddy. Hank wrapped them both in a trembling embrace. And that's when Hank saw them. Two faint, glowing green eyes watching them, waiting. The fear was heavy, pressing down on him. Every instinct told Hank to fire, to fight, or run. Those eyes never moved, never blinked. And then, almost as if by decision, the presence in the trees seemed to pull back, fading into the darkness. Hank tightened his grip on June and Donald's shoulder, his chest still pounding. He didn't know why, but deep down, he understood. If they had wanted to kill them, they never would have made it out alive. To this day, the Johnson family has rarely spoken of what they saw in the Shasta Trinity National Forest. Some believe it was a family of Bigfoot. Others say the mountain is a magnet for high strangeness, and anything is possible. Whatever the truth may be, one fact remains. In 1989, something powerful attacked the Johnson family and their guide. And for reasons we may never understand, it chose to let them leave.
The Screaming Woods of Iron Creeks. There's a stretch of land up north near the Shasta Trinity Wilderness where the trees grow too close together and the air never seems to move. Locals call it Iron Creeks, though on any modern map, that name doesn't exist. In the summer of 1986, 4 men went there to work. By the end of the week, 3 were dead, and the 4th was never found. It was supposed to be routine, a 3-day geological survey before fire season. The crew consisted of 2 brothers, David and Mark Wilson, a geologist named Alan Crow, and a radio technician, Jeff Holloway. They drove in with 2 pickup trucks, old Chevy models loaded with equipment. The dirt road wound for miles until it simply gave up and turned to gravel, then dust. From there they hiked. The forest thickened around them, redwoods and firs so tall they felt like walls. The sun dimmed to a greenish haze that never quite reached the ground. Jeff noted that the compass needle jittered every few steps, like the forest itself was made of static. By the time they found a clearing beside the dry creek bed, it was almost dark. They pitched their tents, unpacked the radio equipment, and lit a small fire that barely pushed back the shadows. That first night, the forest was quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, no owls, no wind through the branches. The only sound was the faint hum of Jeff's radio picking up nearby frequencies. He was adjusting the dial when it happened. A low, vibrating sound bled through the static. Not electronic, not mechanical, something deeper. Like a growl pressed through metal. Then, beneath it, words began to form. Go back down. Jeff froze. He played it again. Same phrase, same voice. Alan told him it was interference, maybe a ranger tower catching weather reports. But there were no towers within 50 miles. Morning came with fog so thick it erased the horizon. David left camp to mark survey boundaries and nearly tripped over a footprint in the mud. It was massive, 16 inches long, 6 inches deep, wide enough to fit both his boots inside. 5 toes, but spaced strangely, as though a hand had pressed into the ground instead of a foot.
He followed the impressions for a few yards until they vanished into a tangle of roots and stone. When he looked up, he swore he saw movement, a shape retreating into the mist. Back at camp, Mark took photos, joking about Bigfoot's autograph. But none of them were laughing when they realized the prints were fresh. The edges hadn't even begun to dry. They spent the rest of the day mapping quietly. Every sound, snapping twigs, dripping water, made them flinch. By sunset, they'd built the fire higher than before. That night the air felt charged, the kind of tension before a thunderstorm, though the sky was clear. Jeff sat beside the radio, headphones on, eyes wide. He said he could hear something underneath the static. Breathing. He turned up the volume, and the others leaned in. Through the crackle came faint voices, their own, laughing, talking, repeating things they'd said earlier that day. Only wrong, slowed down, stretched. Beneath it was a wet, guttural sound like something breathing along with them. Then came the screaming, human, agonized, echoing. They tore off the headphones. The sound stopped. But somewhere out in the trees, something snapped, a heavy branch breaking under weight. Alan grabbed the flashlight and swept it across the clearing. For a moment, it caught 2 points of reflected light. Dull amber eyes, far too high off the ground. The body behind them shifted. The beam trembled over a wet sheen of fur, slick with rain or blood. They couldn't tell which. David lifted his rifle and fired once. The forest exploded with movement. Something enormous charged through the dark, tearing through branches, slamming into tree trunks with impossible force.
Then silence. They stayed awake till dawn, each man holding something, a flashlight, a shovel, the rifle, watching the edge of the firelight for movement. When the sun finally rose, it brought no comfort. Their gear had been disturbed. Tents shifted. Crates moved several feet from where they'd been. There were drag marks leading into the trees, as though something had reached in and tried to pull their belongings away during the night. Alan insisted they pack up and leave, but the old trucks were too far down the mountain, and the compass still spun uselessly. They decided to wait for daylight to fully break before hiking out. When they finally tried to hike out, the forest felt wrong. The air had weight to it, pressing down on them, thick and humming like it carried a low electrical charge. Every sound seemed to echo in the wrong direction. The trail that should have led downhill twisted upward, and the creek that ran beside camp now curved away entirely. They were sure they'd hiked several miles towards their trucks, but somehow they'd circled back. The same bent pine, the same pile of stones. Something about the forest made it hard to think straight, like their sense of direction was being pulled apart. The air itself felt alive, aware. Because every time they tried to leave Iron Creek, the forest brought them right back. The men, exhausted from no sleep the night before and their endless miles walking in circles, finally decided to stay at their camp that night. At 7, Jeff checked the radio again, maybe out of habit, maybe to feel normal. The static was back, but something in it was changing. This time, it wasn't voices, it was sound, mimicry. The call of birds, the wind, even Alan's cough, all echoing back seconds later, slightly warped, like something repeating the world as it heard it.
Then, layered under it, came whispering. Not words at first, just a breath. Then, clearer. You shouldn't have stayed. That evening, the fog thickened again. The men huddled close to the fire, no one speaking. The woods around them groaned and shifted, like something moving inside the trees themselves. At some point past midnight, Mark said he saw a shadow standing between two fir trunks, tall, bent, half-human. He blinked, and it was gone. Then the radio clicked on by itself. Their voices came through again, this time calling out for one another. Alan, David, Jeff, each name repeated in a different pitch. They could hear movement, branches breaking, something circling them closer each time. Jeff whispered, "It's copying us." A hand hit the tent wall from the outside, leaving a dark smear of mud across the canvas. Something enormous moved past, breathing hard enough to shake the air. The fire flared, then died. The next sound was screaming. 3 days later, search and rescue found what was left of their camp. Tents ripped open, sleeping bags dragged several yards away. The trees around the site leaned inward, bark stripped from one side as if something had pushed against them. They found David, Mark, and Alan. Their bodies were torn, but not eaten, as if clawed, then left. Each bore deep scratches along the shoulders, like finger marks that ended abruptly at the neck. Jeff Holloway was never found. The radio equipment was smashed, but one tape survived. It began with heavy breathing, then Jeff's voice shaking. He said, "It's in the trees. It's learning us." Then came a burst of static, a thud, branches breaking, and finally, in that same deep, distorted tone as before, "You shouldn't have stayed." The tape ended there. Rangers closed off the site, citing soil instability and erosion hazards. But locals still whisper about the place. They call it the Screaming Woods. Some say that on still nights, if you stand near the old Iron Creek Road, you can hear radio static drifting between the trees, faint like it's searching for a frequency. Others swear they've heard voices calling for help. The strangest stories come from hikers who swear the voices sound familiar. Sometimes, they say, it's their own.